Hello, David Webb here, and welcome to David Webb Art. This is Elberry Cove, a quiet cove on the southwest coastpath, which is quite close to us, this little stretch, and it's part of the path that we use quite regularly on our morning walks. And on this occasion, a few months back, I took this footage on my phone because the water was so calm, but there was a little bit of movement in those reflections there, reflecting the old bathhouse, an 18th century bathhouse. So I thought it would be a good subject for a watercolour demo. So you can see I've cropped it down so it fits in the proportions of the paper, and I've put the horizon on the top third. So colour wise I'm using cobalt blue, alizarin crimson, light red, burnt sienna, Indian yellow and raw sienna. Just those 6 colours for this one. And first thing to do is to wet the surface of the paper with this larger brush, because the first wash is going to be painted wet into wet. I'm just going to mix colours on the paper, let them do their own thing, just to create a sort of background atmospheric wash. Now with my smaller brush I'm going to do some of the painting. So in the sky I've put cobalt blue and light red, working down the paper, boards at an angle so it's flowing down the paper. And in the middle there I'm just using a little bit of Indian yellow to go with the blue, just to create some green. And then back to light red and cobalt blue for the foreground. I'm using the same 2 colours there in the building. And then in the trees there I'm using raw sienna, light cobalt blue and a bit of Indian yellow too. Indian yellow in the lighter parts and raw sienna in the more shady parts mixed with cobalt. In the building on the right I've got light red, burnt sienna and cobalt blue, and then we just let that dry completely before going on to the next stage, which is wet on dry. But I'm still mixing the colours on the paper, so they're sort of wet into wet on the paper, but the paper is bone dry. Cobalt blue, light red and a little bit of yellow you can see in that green area there. Just test the colours here. I've got some cobalt, some light red and a little bit of raw sienna there. Again, start painting down the paper, boards at an angle, so we get the bead at the end of the brush stroke, keeps it moving, keeps the lower edge of the wash wet, so we don't get any drying marks, just working down the paper. I've left a few gaps in the water there. And back to the trees at the top there, I'm just rubbing out some of the harsher lines that were left. Just brush those away. And then I'm going to just paint some of the foliage in using Indian yellow and cobalt blue. And in some of the darker parts I use cobalt blue mixed with raw sienna. So we get a bit of contrast. We've got some bright coloured foliage and some dark. And that's all sort of connected there. In the building I'm starting on now, I'm using cobalt blue again with burnt sienna and perhaps a little bit of light red here and there. Just painting one big flowing shape really. No need for detail at this stage. And I'm just adding a little bit of light red just above the old windows there, just to indicate the red brickwork. No glass left in those windows, so they're just sort of dark recesses. Bit of raw sienna here mixed with cobalt blue. Suggested some of the moss on the wall there. Again, just a little bit of light red above that window there, or door. So that's one big connected wash you see there. Some darker green on the right hand side. And now I'm painting the larger rocks there. I start off with burnt sienna, perhaps a little bit of raw sienna mixed in as well, and then the darker parts I'm using cobalt blue and burnt sienna. lots of blue in there. Same again on the left hand rock. I start with raw sienna with a touch of burnt sienna mixed in, and then the darker parts we use cobalt blue and burnt sienna and a touch of light red as well, which adds a little bit more colour. You see those two rocks at the moment, they're connected shapes, and that goes straight down into the reflection as well. It's all one big wash there. Just trying to capture those ripples there, as you can see from the moving footage there. And in the left hand rock, same thing, just carry that down straight into the reflection. Leave a few gaps here and there to suggest the broken water in the reflections. And then bring that down towards the beach. Carry that on into the tide line there. Bit of dry brush coming up now. Just on that water surface, there we go. And then adding more burnt sienna and cobalt blue. That's it, just blend that in there. Now over to the wall on the right. I'm just going to add in some more deeper tone now, cobalt blue and burnt sienna and light red. Leave a few gaps here and there to suggest some texture. And as we work our way down the building, I'm working into the greens as well. Got Indian yellow and cobalt blue. Here and there I mix the blue with raw sienna to get that darker green. Some raw sienna in the wall as well. So lots of big shapes going on at the moment. No need for too much detail at this stage. And now back to the bathhouse. This will be our third wash now. I've got to wait till that previous wash has dried, and now I'm just painting the darker recesses there, the windows. I start with a dark shape at the top and just soften it towards the lower edge, and now I'm reinstating that brickwork with light red. There we go. A little bit of dry brush coming up, so I test it on a piece of scrap paper first, and then just add a little bit of texture on the top of that wall, not too much. Towards the base of that wall, it's quite dark, and we want that to contrast with the top of the rock there. So you've got dark wall and a lighter rock. So back to the foliage at the top. I'm painting the shadows on the foliage, and for that I use a mix of alizarin crimson and cobalt blue. That makes a nice cool purple. It's mostly blue with a touch of crimson, but it's really good on foliage because it allows the green to still show through. It cools it down, but it looks very natural. Now the rocks, dark mix again. We've got cobalt blue and a touch of light red in there. Quite a strong mix. Add a few little ripples just to break up the water surface. There we are, a few dark ripply shapes. Left hand rock now. That same blend, creating some darker shapes on there. There are some darks along the water's edge there. Where the water laps gently up the beach, it creates a darker edge, doesn't it? Because the water and the beach, they meet and you get a dark, damp area there. Just soften that with a light brush. So onto the foreground wall now, on the right hand side. Again, just little bits of texture. Mostly cobalt and burnt sienna there. And in the foliage there, I'm using cobalt blue with just a touch of crimson. You can see it's a transparent wash going on. It still allows that green wash to show through. That's it. Not too much. So, using a fine brush, just to do in the twigs at the top there, put those in, a dark shape here and there, just to tie the leaves together. And in the foreground, back to my number 2 brush, I'm just adding a little bit of texture on the beach there to contrast with the smooth water. So you can see most of the detail is in the foreground, the background is nice and soft. And that's about it. That's finished. So most of the detail is in the foreground. We've got a nice range of tones as well, big simple shapes, lots of washes, and transparency all the way. Well, I hope you enjoyed that video, and I hope to see you in the next one.